Today on the Veteran Ventures podcast, we have Mike Hall and Rich Garner. They are the epitome of selfless service in their pursuit to lower suicide rates and divorce rates among service members. Together, they started a nonprofit called Hold the Reins, and it's a great interview today with two people who really care about service members and their families. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military.
I retired from the military before Y2K hit and went into private business, ran a communications company, ended up with a massive sales team, 8 retail locations, cellular communications, back then long distance, internet, etc. Ran that between Richmond and the Virginia Beach oceanfront for a few years. And then the wars kicked off and I loaded up and went back and worked as a security contractor and other things for different government agencies, primarily the State Department and the DoD. So now I have been training horses full time for the last 15 years.
Did you have I assume you grew up riding horses or had an equine background?
I did. I came off of Century Ranch out in the West Coast, California and Oregon. It's all I knew, right? I was a cowboy. I graduated from high school, cowboyed for a couple of years and got it's 20 degrees below zero. You're feeding cows. And I was tired of being cold, wet, and tired. So I joined the Navy and became a SEAL.
Makes perfect sense.
I wanted all the comfort aspects.
Yeah, SEALs are never cold, wet, or sandy, right?
Not so as we'd ever admit it.
And Mike, we'd love to talk about your background too, kind of where you came from, your military experience as well. And I know you've got a fresh perspective on the military transition, so a little take on that too.
Yeah, right. I'm kind of a mixed breed. I came from Ohio, moved down to Georgia. Most of my formative years were in Georgia. I made a series of bad decisions between 18 and 21 years old. I'm sure I'm not the only guy out there, but I made a bunch of them, which led my parents to call my biological dad in Tucson because I was just too much for them. They didn't want to buy the risk. So I moved in with my dad in Tucson. He got me straightened out, and then I joined the Navy from there. I went to the fleet. I was on the USS Nimitz as a supply guy for a year and a half, and I got catapulted off of the boat. And 7 days later, I started BUDS with 266. Got rolled to 267 because I had a little problem with the water. The first time I ever swam in the ocean was when I went to BUDS. It was a steep learning curve. But I ended up being number one in my BUDS class, graduating 267 from BUDS and SQT, became our leading petty officer and graduated class 267, spent some time at SEAL Team 8, and then went to Naval Special Warfare Development Group where I was with TAC Devron 2. Spent the majority of my career at Dev Group and just recently, a week ago, retired. And the transition, from Rich's years on earlier to where we are now and the number of benevolent programs that we have to help the service member is night and day. I think Rich can tell you better than I can, but the stories I've heard him told, he was just like, all right, don't let the door hit you in the butt kind of thing. Our generation of warfighter is insulated with all sorts of programs. Navy SEAL Foundation, the SEAL Future Foundation. There's just a lot going on that helps us prepare for the next phase of our life. A gentleman at work told me, transitioning out of the military is the most important op you'll ever plan in your life because we're taking along our friends and family. Like our family depends on how well we plan that next phase of our life. And I was fortunate enough I'm an alumni of the Honor Foundation, cohort 89. And they were actually the first organization that gave me the opportunity. They said, it's okay to look at yourself. It's okay to be honest with yourself. It's okay to admit the things that you're good at. It's okay to brag about yourself and think. They gave us opportunities to reflect on the experience that we've had in austere locations and on our deployments and the things that we've done technically besides kicking indoors. So that was huge. That gave me the springboard to be able to have normal conversations, not using military jargon, being able to translate all of my military experience into corporate or private sector speak. So my transition has landed me in a position where I'm interviewing for a few jobs, one of them to be at the Honor Foundation, one of them to be at a Purina feed, and then I have a couple opportunities to be a contractor. So all of that transition piece I started that about 18 months out. So that transition piece really took a lot longer than I thought it would. I mean, if I could have started it 2 years out, if I could do it again, I would have done it about 2 years out. But everything, I think, all in all, with the amount of support that we have with the modern day warfighter and the modern military member, there's no excuses to fail as a veteran.
I would love to jump right into something you said, and it's something we like to focus on a lot is the actual timeline for the transition. So you mentioned 18 months, maybe even if you could have taken 24 months. With the fact that civilian companies aren't necessarily hiring 24 months out, what did you do at the beginning of that transition period that you thought you needed the time, and how did you sow the seeds for the transition before you actually got into the job offer or the application type of interview process?
Right. It's all networking. It's the same thing that Rich and I did when we started Hold the Reins. Really, before I made before the introduction was made between me and Rich was like, okay, I got this. We're going to do well. I've run businesses before. I'll steer us in the right directions. I'll never let this go off the rails. So Rich has been a godsend for me as a mentor. He plays a lot of roles in my life. But as a business mentor, there's just a wealth of knowledge that he brings to the table. So I've kind of been lucky and blessed to have him in my life. But to get to him, I had to make a lot of phone calls. I had to do a lot of networking. I just had to be brutally honest with myself and everyone that I spoke to. Start Hold the Reins, a lot of my conversations started with passion and humility. Hey, I don't know what I don't know, but here's what I want to do. Same thing, kind of. I took the same approach into all of my networking calls to get into the corporate world. I just started a LinkedIn page. I started connecting with people who are in jobs that I was interested in. And hey, Tom, I'm Michael Hall. This is my situation. I don't know what I don't know about the corporate world, but I see that you're a director of operations. Do you mind having a cup of coffee with me? Just a 15, 30-minute conversation about what your life is like, what the job is like, what advice you would have for me. So it really became apparent networking, who you know, and how you're assessed played a large role for me in landing opportunities in the corporate world. So if I could go back 2 years, I would spend 6 months deep diving who I am, transferring all of my knowledge from military to corporate speak, and then spending that last 18 months really networking and really nugging down what I think I want to do.
Well, let me take a second and say congrats on officially transitioning so recently on the other side of it. That's awesome. And a lot of people have mentioned the Honor Foundation on this podcast before. I think it's a phenomenal group. Could you talk a little bit more about the curriculum they kind of put you through and how that was helpful in your process, figuring out what was next, what direction you wanted to go, how to kind of tap into where your personal passion comes from and other considerations?
Absolutely. They do a lot of things that, like the Clifton strengths, they do a lot of things that create an opportunity for the service member to look inward. There's no bravado in their organization. It's, hey, you have your unique set of skills. You have your unique background. You have your unique education. Let us help you let us help you make that work for you. They have the Clifton strengths. There's a lot of introspective work that they encourage everyone to do. And like I said, for the military member, that's a hard thing to do, especially in the teams. We're always told team gear, troop gear, like you come last on the order of things. And if you come last on the order of things, that means your family's down there with you. All your roles and responsibilities domestically come last. Like teams come first. So to have an organization say, hey, all stop for the next 3 months, this is about you. They bring in guest speakers who are successful businessmen, entrepreneurs, CEOs of energy companies. The Honor Foundation spares no expense to give all their fellows a different look at every single component of the corporate world that might tie into defense, but also has nothing to do with defense. LifeNet is one nonprofit in the area that has a lot to do with donors. We're talking organic donors, when we're talking organs or whatever it may be, cadaver donors. But I've seen their building 100 times, but I never would have guessed they were a nonprofit, never would have guessed what they did or what kind of talent they're looking for. So the Honor Foundation brings in all these organizations and allows the company to say, hey, we love you guys. We love military. This is why we love y'all. This is what we do. Please reach out to us. And before you know it, you have CEOs, business cards on your desk, and truly they want to help. Truly they want to offer you a spot and some position, if not just having a cup of coffee. And getting those reps to talk about ourselves is one of the more significant things. And the Honor Foundation takes us on these treks. They call them treks, where we go visit companies to walk the facility, have discussions with their employees live, to talk about where they came from, to talk about where they're going. So it's a really deep, immersive experience that encourages the fellows to have introspection, but then without any pressure or expectations, takes the fellows out into the corporate world and just said, hey, this is it. It's kind of like doing a weapons fam before you actually go into the range and shooting it. They really break down all the stressors and the unknown variables. They expose all of the unknown variables and just, hey, this is what we're getting you into. And then they provide coaching throughout the whole thing. Then you're able to coordinate with your coach and have those conversations about, hey, the coach, first thing the coach asked me, hey, what are you looking for? His name's Gordon Langford. I said, Gordon, Rich has met Gordon. I said, Gordon, I know more what I don't want than what I do want. And he said, all right, that's a great starting point. Let's go from there. And he's still my coach to this day. And I've been an alumni for over a year now. So that it's like a lifelong coach. So the Honor Foundation, once they take in their fellow, you're an Honor Foundation alumni for life. So you have access to their network, just like you did when you were in the cohort. You have access to your coach for life. I mean, it's really one of those communities that it isn't just a service. It's not one thing that Rich and I talked about with our program, we don't want guys and gals to come out and just have an experience and leave. We want them to be part of our community. And I think the Honor Foundation's done a good job of that.
I appreciate that overview. It's really helpful. You mentioned two things that I think are incredibly important there. One is advocating for yourself. You mentioned it. It's ingrained in all of us who serve, especially mission comes first, unit is a top priority as well. And the self is very bottom of the priority list. And not that it's a bad thing necessarily, but when you get out, you have to have a slight balancing act of like, I do need to advocate for myself. The civilian world, people kind of do that naturally and it's implied. But for us, it's like we're much more self-sacrificial than I think most when they approach job applications or when they approach salary negotiations, all these things that may come naturally for someone who's kind of grown up in the civilian world. For us, it's like, man, I've never advocated for myself for anything. All I've done is done whatever I can to help the mission and help the unit.
Yeah. And in the military, the way the military is set up is you promote. It's a meritocracy. Like you put out and advancements happen, awards happen. You feed the machine, and most times, more often than not, the machine will then reward you.
And you mostly don't have to ask that machine for anything either.
It's set up to help you advance the longer that you're in and the wickets that you hit in training or experience and different things like that. And what I'm finding on the corporate side, you really have to fight more tooth and nail and get where you need to be to vouch for yourself, because there's no senior enlisted advisor, there's no XO, there's no one going to bat for you on a promotion board or anything like that. We then have to do that for ourselves.
That's right. And the other thing you said that I just want to hit on real quick is you said, start with what you don't want. And you said that was a helpful framing for you with your coach. And we said that before on here. It's a lot easier to make that inversion rather than saying what you want, because almost nobody can put a finger on exactly what they want. It's really hard to nail that down if you are, especially during a transition period. But you know very well what you don't want from past experiences, from things you learned along the way. So I think that's such an important thing, just as many times as we can, to reiterate that fact. Like, start with what you don't want and then let that narrow in on the right direction for you, because it's a lot easier to take it from that approach. But I want to kick it over to you, Rich, real quick. You guys Mike mentioned how Rich is kind of a godsend. You guys have a great partnership going, and would love to dig into that a little bit, because partnerships can be so tricky. It can be hard to find great people to work with over the long term. And so what is it, Rich, that kind of made it a no-brainer for you to start working with Mike. And I'd love to learn more about how you guys think about partnerships and how you think about working together over the long term and finding the right people to be part of endeavors together.
Yeah. So I feel like what I've done in my life had really formed me to do what we do with Hold the Reins as far as the horsemanship, the SEAL background, the business experience, nonprofit experience. And so when I got a message from a buddy that said, hey, there's this guy that I know at the team. He just wants to do something with horses and SEALs and nonprofit. Would you talk to him? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll talk to him. And so Mike and I got on the phone and we worked through that a little bit. And probably our second or third conversation, I think we had seen each other once. He said, well, we really need a president for Hold the Reins. And I said, yes. He goes, I'd like you to do that. And I said, okay. He goes, don't you need time to think about it? And I said, no, this makes sense. I want to do this. And the big reason was, back to your point, Griff, was in the retail horse training industry on the East Coast, for sure, 99% of the people that we deal with are women, and 99 to 100% of their horses are their emotional support animal. They'll tell you they do this with their horse, they do that, but most of them, it's there just to support them emotionally. And so after dealing with that client population for a number of years, it dawned on me, okay, they don't really want their horse to do this or that. What they want is to get along with the animal. So Mike shows up and I go, wait a minute now. I've got an adult learner who's learned countless skills in his adult life. Most people don't. He's a boy. They're a little easier for me to deal with. And he wants me to help him understand horsemanship and run an organization where we're going to use horses for emotional support for guys that I absolutely love and respect. How hard is that? Right. And so it made perfect sense. And teaming up with Mike after I was with him a couple of times, working with the horses, just like most frogmen, he's got an absolute hunger to master the next thing. But I saw quickly that he had that softer side and could feel the emotion of the animal. And he was really looking to connect in a completely different way than a lot of guys might. And so that's what we needed for what we're doing. And so he was easy to work with, it was easy to talk to. If I say, hey, Mike, I don't think we should do that, he's like, okay. So a partnership is really formed when both people bring something that the other one perceives they can't really get by without. I had somebody mentoring me years ago in a business. I was partnered with somebody and they said, well, sit down and ask yourself, why do I need them? And I thought, and I was like, I don't. And that partnership dissolved immediately. Right? Mike and I need each other in Hold the Reins for a variety of reasons. But the biggest is we both believe in the mission. We both have seen the fruit that it produces, and neither one of us wants to do it without the other one. So hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. It certainly does. Mike said, hey, Rich, I got horses, SEALs, and business. What else can I tell you?
Oh, Mike.
Yeah, I started with a lot. What Rich is leading on to, because my experience, Rich went to a school that he was the first generation to not ride a horse to. Rich grew up in an environment where he's probably spent more time on four legs than four wheels.
Did he ride a donkey to that horse or what?
No, I think motorized transportation finally made it out to the boonies by the time he was in elementary
Sorry,
school.
Rich.
Literally, Griff, I went to a one-room schoolhouse, 1st through 8th grade, 16 kids in one room.
Wow.
And I was the first generation of 4 that didn't ride a horse to school.
Man.
So yeah, strange, but I am that old too. So there's that.
And Rich lives the code of the West. He's deeply faithful. He's been a spiritual advisor, kind of like a godfather to me, and just has such a good quality to him, like a good human quality to him, that you can't find I've not found many men like him. So going into business, Rich made it easy. Rich has literally been a blessing in more than one way I can't even describe. If I think about it too much, I'll probably get choked up. So we'll save that for post-recording. So going into business, transitioning into entrepreneurship, I've seen a lot of guys get hosed going into business with the wrong people. And Rich has, and like he said, culminated all of his experience. He's made mistakes himself. I've made monumental mistakes. And we've kind of used those mistakes to do good, to make right on all of the things that we see people from our community trying inadvertently going down the same roads. we've been able to use Hold the Reins to affect change in people's lives for the positive.
I have sort of a multi-part question, so you can choose your own adventure, I suppose. But really, I just want to get after, what did the timeline look like for opening this business and pursuing this? What did you, obviously you did it while you were transitioning. And the second part of that question is, being in a super demanding unit that probably required a lot of your time, even with a transition out, did you get the support to have the time to be able to do that? Or did you just do it on your off time and made time nights and weekends to pursue it?
Yeah, it took a while. It took from February 23 to October 23 for me to make some mistakes and get this 501c3 approval, get the business plan together. The first business plan I submitted to Rich was, I think, 64 pages long. It's now down to, I think, 16 pages. So the internet's a beautiful thing. I think once people start using the internet and AI for what it's just designed to be, there is no limit to what you can do as an entrepreneur, and figuring out what models are working for other organizations, scraping that information open source. And I'm here to tell you, if you're inventing the wheel, you're doing it wrong. Find someone who's had success, find their model and make their model yours, make it work for you. So it wasn't an easy road. It was about 15 months from flash to bang before we could get anyone on the farm. When I say the farm, Hold the Reins uses Rich's property in Cortland, Virginia, and Rich's horses. Rich is Hold the Reins. I'm just lucky enough to be a part of it. So it was February 23 to May 24. We brought our first participant out for Hold the Reins. So it took a long time, and there was a lot of mistakes. I burned some cash of ours trying to work in different tools into our business plan that I thought would work with other landowners and people who had horses. And, I started out big. I wanted to take care of all military, first responders, anyone who had a touch point in serving their fellow human. And Rich was wise enough to say, Mike, why don't we just start with the community that we know? Let's see where it goes from there, because we don't do equine therapy. We're not like any other organization out there. Rich has a way with the horse that no one else does. I mean, he travels. People know him because he's made a reputation for himself loading horses in 15 minutes or less, or the service is discounted or free. I've gone to pick up, to load horses with him, and whoever called Rich had people there waiting just to see him work. So neither of us are therapists. We use coaching and we use our cultural wisdom to help people. So that being the case, we've really focused in on our community. When Rich started looking at the guys that were coming out, he's like, oh, we have a lot of work to do. Because the community, surprisingly enough, hasn't changed that much from when he was in the teams. Sorry, Rich. 30 plus,
No, it's
40 years ago. He can see he can see the same look in a 20-something-year-old man's eyes that he had when he was 20-something, or that I had when I was 20-something. So there are things that permeate in our culture that we're both working to change and have a healthier culture to drag down things like divorce rates, substance abuse, and suicidality. Creating Hold the Reins is really, me and Rich started with something, and Rich and I learn every time someone comes out, every time we listen to a podcast, every time we read a book, we level up. We have our own periods of growth of our own when someone comes out and they have a period of growth. So we're really just taking this thing, and wherever God is taking it, that's where we're trying to go. And I think that was the biggest thing I learned as an entrepreneur when Rich and I got serious, and we were like, here we go, buddy, let's do this. And we agreed that if we ever make it about ourselves, we're doing it for the wrong reasons. And we've really relied heavily on Jesus, and we've really relied heavily on our faith, and we follow God's guidance. And that's how we shape who we do business with at a programmatic level. And that's how we talk to people. And that's how we want to deal with everybody that comes across in our lives.
That's awesome.
So it's growing, it's taking shape.
Yeah, that's incredible. It sounds like you both are incredibly humble, but also hungry leaders to humbly say, this isn't about us. It's about serving other people in a really special way. but also being hungry enough to go after it and try and impact a large number of people through this company, this nonprofit. I think that's incredible. I'd love to hear, what does it look like for a participant? What if someone wanted to be involved with Hold the Reins or wanted to be a participant in the program there? What would it look like for them? What are they doing with their horses? How does the program work? That sort of stuff.
Go ahead, Rich.
One of the things, I was going to say, probably 75% of our participants are referred by the therapists that deal with the active duty troops. And so they get, with their permission, the therapist will call and they will fill us in on kind of what's the situation and what's going on with them, what have they experienced, et cetera. And so we've got kind of a warm welcome for them, knowing the direction that it might go. What's interesting is, Griff, if you had a functional family life, you had a great relationship with your wife, your kids, you're not drinking yourself to death, you just don't fit the typical model, but you wanted to come out to learn horsemanship, it would work exactly the same for you as if Jack, who was cratering, came out, like the guy that came out a few weeks ago. He got out of his car and I said, "Hey, I'm Rich." He said, "I'm so-and-so." I said, "How you doing?" And he just said, "Not very good." And he just cratered and just started crying. I'm like, okay, well, we got some work to do here. But we did virtually the same thing with him that I do with the guys that they seem like they're doing pretty well. And so that's really an introduction to the horse. What is the horse? And so we'll spend some time walking around. I think we've got 13 or 14 horses here, and we'll look at different ones and we'll talk about, different bloodlines or breeding. And I want to watch and see what their interest level is. Do they want to learn horsemanship? Are they just here? Are they hurting bad? How are we going to get this started? And then we'll spend time petting, grooming, and I'll watch them be with the horse. And then I'm watching the horses because the horses I use are very well known to me. And so based on how the horse is reflecting the participant's energy, then that's going to kind of craft the direction we go next. As an example, I had a retired SEAL bring his young adult daughter out. We were working, and I could see that she was super anxious, tapping her leg, biting her lip. And I just skipped from all the petting the horse and doing whatever. And I just got her up on the horse bareback. And I just said, "Here, just quietly let your energy go through his feet to the ground, lay on his neck. Everything's quiet and relaxed." I said, "Just soften the center of your body and relax." And we did some breathing. And then she just broke and just started crying. And that's what she needed. She needed that emotional release that she couldn't get walking around in society as a young woman. And so when she apologized, and I said, "Don't apologize. If there's a place on the planet Earth that you can be vulnerable and safe, it's right here." Because, a lot of these guys, Spec Ops is a zero defect deal. You don't get to make mistakes because the consequences are finite. People die, you die, mission fails, etc. So they come out here and I say, "Well, you ready to make some mistakes?" And they're like, "We can do that out here?" I go, "Yeah, you can do that." And Mike and I agreed, hey, we're not going to laugh at the guys. We're going to be real sensitive. And about 6 minutes into the first session, that went out of the window. Because it's a population set that they won't trust you if you're not screwing with them a little bit. But that's to what Mike was saying, that cultural awareness of who we're dealing with. You talk to most military people, especially special operators and especially males, they don't like talking to therapists. And most of them just want to get out of the office. They're going to tell them whatever they got to say. And so I think a lot of things get missed. Mike and I talked early on, if we can help one guy in the next 10 years head off a potential self-harm situation, a suicide situation, just one, then we've been a success. And we've already had 3 in the first year of programming that will openly tell you, "Hey, I was getting ready to do something silly." One actually had a gun in his mouth when help arrived. And so, we just feel very fortunate that God is moving the pieces around the chessboard and bringing those people to us. So to answer your question, a lot of close body contact with the horse, a lot of talking about movement of energy in the horse. They will generally ride the horse the first trip out. And after a couple of sessions, we're teaching them how to do halter exercises with the horse, but we don't want to emphasize performance. Griff, when I say, "Here's what I want you to do," I don't care about the result. I care about you communicating effectively with the animal. And so let's be soft. Let's observe the animal. And a lot of times people say, "Well, oh my goodness, I'm just going too fast, or I'm trying to get the horse to do this. And you just ask them, well, where else in your life does that show? And then just let them talk. Because again, I'm not a therapist. Most of us can fix ourselves if we have a proper sounding board that's loving, kind, compassionate, and is going to simply listen to us. And so I got hit by somebody one day. He said, nobody's ever listened to me the way you did the first day I got here. And I was thinking, and I'm not even listening to you very well right now. We're all guilty of it. People are sharing things with us and we're thinking, well, here's the thing I'm going to tell him to fix his life, right? No, just nothing needs to be said. It all needs to be felt. So that's a big circle to get back to they just spend a lot of time touching and moving and being with the horse.
The unique thing that Rich does is he has one eye on the horse and one eye on the participant. So the horse is really the truth teller, and that becomes the muse in the story. So the horse is able to, he knows the horse well enough and he knows our community well enough, and he can tell what the horse is giving him about that person's energy and how to have a conversation to create that opportunity to be vulnerable. And then he follows it up with scripture. He follows it up with his own vulnerability. He matches our participants' vulnerability with his own and gives gentle corrections to what worked for him, and also talks scripture. So it's really a divine, in my opinion, it's watching Rich work is really a divine organism, all unique in its own, because like Rich said, every person that comes out is uniquely their own. So they all have their own unique experience.
Rich, do you think it was just a lifetime of experience that led to that? Or, obviously you say you're not a therapist, but it sounds like you have found a way to make a human connection with these people, and through maybe using the horse as a way to do that. But is that something that your childhood, like you saw maybe like a grandpa use a horse to communicate with, or, connect with people, or where does that come from?
Well, the horse piece of it comes from literally touching and handling thousands of horses. I've ridden well over 1,000 horses in the last 10 or 15 years. I think the other part of it is it's truly a gift. I didn't do anything to deserve it. It's just the way God made me. And, the spiritual side of this, when people arrive, there's no preaching, there's no trying to convert somebody. What happens generally at some point when their guard is down and they're willing to communicate, and that doesn't take long. Usually I'll just say, well, Jack, where are you spiritually? And then I listen, right? I've had them say all sorts of things, but by and large, most guys have a belief in God, and then you can kind of steer that. And coming back to your question, it's truly a gift. And we're going to paper this building with banners and signs. And one of the signs when you first come in will just simply say, what are you doing with the gift? Because everybody on this call has a gift of some sort. First thing you have to do is recognize it's a gift. I didn't do it. You don't do something to deserve a gift. That's called trading. So it's a gift. What are your gifts, or what's been given to you? And then what are you going to do with it? And that really centers around do something positive with it. So,
yeah, I heard something recently. It's just the idea of a gift. It was if somebody offered you $10 million today, but the catch is that you wouldn't wake up tomorrow, would you take it? And the answer, no, nobody would take that, right? So the argument there is that tomorrow is worth more than $10 million to you. So it's a gift to just be able to wake up tomorrow, and how you use that is you should be at least think in the back of your mind. It's worth quite a bit of money just to be able to wake up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the questions I ask people, Jack, is, hey, Jack, show me your past. Is it in your car? Where's your past? And it lives in your head. And probably almost nobody cares about your past. They're dealing with what we see right here in the moment. We know that because the horse has no prefrontal cortex, no frontal lobe. The horse can't make meaning out of anything. The horse can only feel and experience. They are in the moment. So it's 50 first dates with your horse. And so when you walk up to the horse, they don't know you have a past. They don't know there's a future. They can't plan for this afternoon's activities. And one of the things that everybody has said will be about 30 minutes, 45 minutes into a session, and I'll say, so what are you thinking about? And I'll do it with a smile, and they'll go, nothing. Just thinking about this horse, right? How often, Griff, when you were on active duty, could you actually say, I'm not thinking about anything right now?
No.
We're constantly not in the moment, right? So be present. And the horse helps us to coach people to do that. I had a situation a couple of Saturdays ago. I'd say a young man, he's 42, about your age, Mike. He and I were both in Iraq at the same time. We didn't know each other. We're in the same AO up out near Mosul and kind of to the west. He was an 18-year-old kid, and he departed from there with a lot of moral injury, a lot of post-combat stress. And so his mind had been retooled in a pretty dramatic way. So he was referred by a therapist. He came out, good dude to be around. He was soft and emotional. When he got out of his car, I said, listen, we don't know each other right now. I said, but the next couple hours, we're going to be close. I promise you. 3 hours and 21 minutes later, which is unusual, we were close. And he said, it's just so refreshing to be able to tell the things I've done to somebody that's seen it and won't judge me. And I was like, yeah, man, me too. I get it.
Man, what a powerful thing you guys have going there. That's incredible. Man, I'd love to, this is a bit of a pivot here, but I'd love to start with you, Rich, and then hand it over to Mike as well. But, you mentioned several major transitions that you made. And so kind of bridging this back a little bit to directly to the transition process, you went from service, then into the business world, then back into military type work through contracting, and then back into full-time training horses. So you've had several substantial pivots or transitions in your life. How do you think about, making that substantial shift or making that big step in a different direction to make sure that you end one thing well, start the next thing well? And I guess to kind of round out the question, how do you think about that process going from things that seem so drastically different and starting a whole new chapter?
Well, the big thing is to be forewarned that it's going to happen. I made a statement to somebody that knows and cares about Mike a few weeks ago, and I said, I'm concerned, not in a bad way, but I'm concerned for Mike as he goes through this process because it's going to be extremely emotional. And Mike now has developed this big soft heart for people and things. And so I, as somebody that loves and cares about him, I'm like, we need to kind of keep an eye on Mike and be there to support him as things change. So back to your question, I have trained myself for the last almost 30 years to welcome transition and change. And so when I find myself about to transition somehow, I try to attack it. It's just like if I'm riding in this crowd behind me and a young horse, I can't talk it out of trying to buck me off, then I attack the buck instead of trying to cling to it like a circus monkey. I ride the buck. And so when you're going through transition, I would encourage people to try to attack the transition. Know that it's going to embrace the suck. It's coming. It's going to be tough. Okay. What else? Life is tough. Anybody you talk to, if they're honest, they're going to say, yeah, life pretty much sucks about 90% of the time. And then there's these moments of grace-filled interaction. Jack, with your kids, you look at them and you go, man, that right there makes it all worth it. Right. So as frogmen, I suggest we jump from lily pad of graceful existence to lily pad. Stay out of the water. That's where the alligators swim. Right. And so just embrace the change. And I've made a lot more changes than I mentioned. So I've gotten good at that, actually.
Sounds like it. It certainly sounds like that's the case.
I have not had a job since I left the military, however many years ago, 30 years ago almost. So I've worked for myself, it's all been 1099 or self-employed. I mean, I'm not bragging. It's been tough. But with that, there's no floor. You could be 3 months behind on your mortgage, or you could have a gob of money in the bank, right? And being self-employed can be difficult, but for people of the proper mindset, I encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I'd kick it over to you as well. You mentioned, in similar kind of vein of questions with your transitions, but you mentioned the first time you had swam in the ocean was at Bud's. You started off as a supply guy in the Navy before going to the SEALs, which I have to imagine is not a normal route. Like, how have you taken these less conventional routes and accelerated? You went from, never swam in the ocean to top of your class. And I mean, that's like kind of unprecedented steps to make. And you say it very casually, and I appreciate that, but there's a lot that goes into that. So how do you not only accelerate the learning curve through these very strenuous and difficult situations, but also embrace those transitions and embrace the suck, like Rich is saying?
Yeah, I don't think there's a secret to the sauce, really. I don't know if it's come with age or if I've always been like this, but being purposeful, finding purposeful work there's a lot of different people out there who want a lot of different jobs post-military, and they all have their own reasons for those. And I think it's important for everyone to sit with themselves and understand why they're making the decisions that they're making. And the more meaningful process that they use to make their decisions, the more they're going to want it. Doing things because they're influenced, because someone is influenced to do them, or because it's easy, I don't think is going to pay off. I always say if it's free, you don't want it. Striving and really getting some dirt under your fingernails and getting some blood on the knuckles and not being afraid to be told no. Every time I was told no, it really just gave me a little bit more drive and determination. I started out with an angel investor for Hold the Reins, and after 8 months of tooling around with him, I figured out he was more about profit than purpose. So I had to tell a billionaire to kick rocks, which we just weren't aligned. And I knew it was going to work with the right people. And I think people in transition, it works very similarly. Having the right relationships is going to be the biggest indicator of how the transition is going to go.
I love the saying that if someone tells you no, don't take that as the answer. Just assume you asked the wrong question. And it seems like both of you have really honed in on the fact that you're going to find a way to yes and figure out the right question to ask to get there, which is, one of the most valuable things you could take into any endeavor in life.
Exactly. And I think prayer has a lot to do with that, because things that we want aren't necessarily what God has intended for us. And don't say no to saying no to opportunities is something that I gave up. When there's someone who wants to have a conversation on LinkedIn or, hey, can I offer you this? Well, I'm at least going to have that conversation, sit still and listen, because I never know who God's trying to put in my life. And it's for me to meditate and pray on to understand what God wants for me, vice what I want for myself. Rich says, I wish I could share it to you on this podcast, but I have a whole Rolodex of Rich's wisdom. He comes up with things and he doesn't mean to, he just does. But good ideas and motivations come from three places. They come from ourselves and self-serving. They come from Satan and all of our ego. And then they come from God. And it's up to us to decide what God's will is for us.
Yeah, well said. Well, maybe we'll have a separate conversation to just distill all of Rich's wisdom, and I think we can all benefit from that one for sure.
That. He would say to me, I don't remember saying that.
Well, gentlemen, towards the end of the podcast, we ask the same thing to everybody. And one is how can our audience help your endeavors with what you're trying to do? And then the second follow-up question to that is going to be, how can you help our audience, either a piece of advice or something like that? But we can start with the first part. What's something that somebody listening can do to help you guys?
Rich, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Well, the first is, if you or somebody you know really is struggling, get them in touch with us, because we do SEAL, SWCC, EOD, but I've worked with wives, kids, Army, Marines, first responders. It doesn't matter. So if they're in the sound of our voice right now and they're struggling, then get a hold of us, and they can go to the website and contact us, and we will do our best to help them through whatever. So that's the first thing they could do for us. Second, of course, is we're always looking at, we don't want to grow this so big that all we do is manage it. We want to impact the next person that comes down the driveway. And so we want more people, but we always need more funding. It's a nonprofit. There's no way. We will probably try to develop a for-profit, maybe leadership courses, things like that down the road. But for right now, there's no profit side to what we do. So that would be another one. If they feel led to donate or lead us to donors, we'd appreciate that as well. And then the second part of that was, that's what we can do for you. Yeah, slow down. I've given that advice over the last couple of weeks to probably 10 or 15 young people. I wished I had learned a long time ago to slow down. And what I'm talking about is, when you're going down the road, Griff, and you see that lane has 2 less cars than the lane you're in coming up to a light, do you swerve over and go to that lane? If you do, you need to slow down, because most of these things, it's not so much the activity of moving fast. It's that fast movement, especially for us as veterans. Your insides are spinning so fast that we need to be aware of that and learn to slow it down. And don't do it with substances, which we probably all have. Do it with a mindful approach to what's going on. So physically driving slower, taking more time. And with the horses specifically, I tell guys, hey, take longer, slower steps. You'll get there just as fast, but you'll arrive a lot more relaxed.
Yeah, our buddy Hugh Vale has a saying, if you slow down faster, you'll get there quicker. There's so many things that tie into horsemanship just like that. And when Rich talked about doing the thing, getting a horse to actually do the thing is not really what we're there for. It's to grow the relationship with the horse and create understanding in the horse. And think about how much we try to do the thing and relationships suffer for it. We put ourselves last. We prioritize other things that might be more on the $10 million side and not I want to see tomorrow side. It's just amazing what Rich does on the farm. And I second everything that Rich said. I really don't have anything to add on to it. We would absolutely be blessed if y'all came out to the farm. Don't for a second. One of the most common things that we hear from people who have an interest in coming out, but have reservations. Well, I don't want to take a spot that somebody else may have earned more than I have. And we have room in our schedule. We have plenty of horses. You're not taking anything away from anybody. We are here for you. So please, if you even think that you might be interested, contact us, have a conversation with us, and allow us to bring you out. We have people come from out of state. We've had folks from Texas, Montana. If you're out of state, we'll find a way to help you get compensated. And that's why we raise money. Rich doesn't get paid. I don't get paid. We truly put every dollar into the program for anyone who wants to come experience the healing power of a horse.
Man, that's incredible. Well, thank you guys, one, for taking the time to come on the show. This has been great and, very unique from previous conversations we've had. So we appreciate that. And two, thank you for what you do for people on the farm and elsewhere. It sounds like you both have conversations with folks that range far beyond just what happens on the farm with horses. I'm sure it reflects in everything you do in your lives. So thank you for that and the way that you serve others every day. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys, and I know it won't be the last time.
Yeah, thank you, Griffin. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.